You've all heard of penance, haven't you? Doing a good act to compensate for a bad act. Well, that's why I'm here today. Many of you may understand easily what I think about Hillary. If you think about someone who you know, who might be about her age, 60s, 70s, who you knew when they were 30, and when they were 30, they were very different people. But you could see in their personality at the age of 30 all of the defects that were to metastasize into dominant characteristics by the time it was 40 or 50 years later. I'm sure everybody knows something like that. Their noses were big, but not that big. The ears were big, but not that big. And when I worked with Hillary 40 years ago, there was a little bit of deceit going on. She would not tell the truth easily. She cut some corners. The futures market, cattle futures bribe, which was basically a bribe from Tyson Foods to not enforce environmental regs against chickens. And they paid her a $100,000 bribe, but the way they could dress it up was to give her $1,000 and let her parlay that in the futures market. And in fact, what they did was get 10 or 20 investors, and the winning bets were all put in Hillary's account so that she would get 100,000. And when she reached 100, which was the amount of the agreed bribe, she stopped. And there was that. There was also, I think, a certain sense of entitlement back then. She would always have this myth that she believed that she was ticketed for a top Wall Street career out of Yale Law School with a great deal of money and a great big firm, but she threw it over for public service to come to Arkansas, a little backward state, and help out the guy who wanted to be the governor to turn the state around. That narrative omits the fact that she flunked the DC bar, and that she couldn't have been hired by anybody. And that after she did that, she was fired by the Watergate Committee for stealing documents, like billing records. The Watergate Committee wanted to find out if Nixon was entitled to counsel. And they looked back at the precedent and they saw that William O. Douglas, the Supreme Court judge who the Republicans wanted to impeach, got counsel. So this was the Republicans saying that this was saying that both parties agreed that there should be counsel. And Hillary took those documents home with her and lost them, and they never surfaced. And she was fired for that. So she could never have gotten a job anyplace. She joined the Rose Law Firm after several years of trying when her husband became Attorney General. She made partner when her husband became governor. She got in charge of health care when her husband was elected president. She got a Senate seat when she defended him against Lewinsky. And when I say got a Senate seat, Bill Clinton cleared the field so there were no Democratic primary rivals worthy of the name to oppose her. And we all put our hopes in Rudy Giuliani, who was taken ill, and thank God is recovered enough now, but he's not running for the Senate. So her accomplishments are totally derivative of her husband. That is not an authentic model of feminism. And at the same time, you see these traits growing and metastasizing to a point where they take over her personality. Secrecy and paranoia, pathological lying, and an entitlement, a greed-based entitlement, a sense that after having lived a decade in the governor's mansion and 8 years in the White House and 5 years in the State Department, never having to drive a car, never having to fly even first class, much less commercial, never having to buy food or laundry or worry about babysitting or anything like that. She's grown addicted to a royal level of privilege. And she sought to continue that when she left the White House, dead broke in her words, with only a $14 million book advance to keep her company. And she immediately set up a new arrangement with Bill This marriage that began as a romance in the 70s and the 80s and then became a business partnership in the 90s has become a racketeering organization, a RICO. Where she sends Bill around the world passing the bag, and people give him speaking fees, and in return the State Department takes official action. And now that she's out of the State Department, she might be president, and the process continues. If she's elected president, Bill will go around getting millions for each speech, and they'll be directly traceable back to stuff that she does for those people as president. Now, why did she have an email server that was secret? Because she needed to hide that paper trail. She couldn't let those emails out there proving this process. For example, one of the big swindles was that Vladimir Putin wanted to take over a Canadian mining company that owned 20% of our uranium reserves. And that required State Department approval. So in June of 2009, Putin invited Bill to Moscow to give 2 speeches for $500,000 each with banks that were essentially state-owned in Russia. He took the cool $1 million in cash, deposited it into the Bill and Hillary personal bank account. And 4 months later, Hillary ruled in favor of the deal. Now, there are 44 mentions of that Rosatom deal in State Department cables over that 4-month period, because it was a real hot topic of controversy within the State Department. But there is not a single mention of it in any of Hillary's emails that were released during that period. Obviously, those emails were deleted. And the whole purpose of the email server was, even if it put our secrets at risk from the Chinese and the Russians, her secrets would not be at risk from the American people. And ultimately, it's that paranoia and secrecy driven by the sense of greed and entitlement that led and leads to Hillary's ongoing scandals. And you meet this person at the age of 68 who you knew at the age of 30, and you say, oh my God, I could see where all of this came from, but she didn't used to be like that. But you can see how these traits metastasized and took over her personality. Now, let's talk a little bit about how Trump is going to beat Hillary. I think one thing he should do is he should say the Clintons hate me, the Bushes hate me, and the Romneys hate me, so what could I be doing wrong? But that points to a larger message. I did some work for the Leave campaign in Britain, and I've been working with them for 12 years. And we see the world in a horizontal dichotomy of continuum of left and right. You're at various points along the spectrum ideologically. That is not how the alienated, apathetic, no-show voter sees politics. He sees politics as an inner circle, a tiny little circle of privilege and power and unspeakable wealth that rigs the system for themselves. Another circle of their acolytes and lawyers and PR people and investment advisors who live off them, if they're good people like symbiotes, if they're bad people like parasites, but they still live off the host. And then a third concentric circle of everybody else who gets screwed by the global economy. And they see Donald Trump just like they saw Bernie Sanders, and just like in Britain they saw leaving the EU as the cause for the outer concentric circle. And a circle has no left and has no right. So in Brexit, we won the same percentage of the vote from conservatives, Tories, as from Labour Party members. There was no left and right in that, any more than there is in any circle. There was a sense of alienation, a sense of being left out, a sense of being an outsider. And Donald Trump needs not to run against Hillary only as a Republican, or as a Democrat, or as a liberal, or even as a thief. He needs to run against her as an insider, as the ultimate insider in our politics. And there's no more insider than the Clintons. And by running that kind of a campaign and speaking for the people in the outermost circle, he can mobilize the voters that have not come out to vote in the past to come out and vote for him. The demographics are daunting. In 2004, Karl Rove and George Bush brought out 10 million new white voters. In 2008, Obama brought out 10 million new African American, Latino, and female and young voters. And they each won their elections because of that. But in 2012, 10 million white voters stayed home because they couldn't handle Romney, because he was typical of that insider circle. And they saw the Republican Party in its worst possible light of Wall Street and vulture capitalism, as they called it. And it made no difference that some of the companies Romney tried to help, he did turn around and he did save jobs. They understood that the motivation there was making money. They saw him as capitalizing on the global economy, on outsourcing and all of that stuff, and they saw this process as fundamentally causing their own impoverishment. And they voted against him. They stayed home. And that was truly Obama's margin of victory. So the first thing Trump needs to do, and the thing that only Donald Trump, among our potential candidates, could possibly do, is to bring those people out to vote, to rekindle their faith in the process, to believe there's a fellow outsider running who scorns the inside just as volubly and just as irritably, crankily as they do, and that mirrors their frustration and their views. And Trump has ignited those people, mobilized them, and they are coming out to vote. And they are how Trump is going to beat Hillary.